everyone, and welcome to our podcast, That's So Auburn. I'm Auburn's Mayor, Nancy Backus. Thank you for tuning in today for our second episode of our new podcast. In our first episode, we talked with Kent Hay, our Homelessness Outreach Administrator, about the things that we're doing to address homelessness in Auburn. It is a huge topic that we knew we couldn't tackle in just one episode, so we're going to continue our conversation with Kent today. If you've not had a chance to listen to part one, I would encourage you to go back and listen. You'll learn a lot about Kent and a lot about our philosophy as we approach the issues of homelessness. Today we're going to address the specific challenges we have when it comes to moving people off of the streets and into safer and healthier living conditions, and let you know how you can be a part of reducing homelessness in Auburn. So let's bring Kent back and start today's episode of That's So Auburn. Welcome back, Kent. I'm glad you're here to talk with our community some more on this very important topic.
Yes, thanks for having me back again, Mayor. I definitely want to add some more to the topic.
Great. And I just want everyone to know that Kent is coming in after he's already had a full day out on the encampments and working with individuals experiencing homelessness. So the man, when he says he can do just about anything or can do anything, he's right. So I just want to acknowledge that Kent is not someone sitting behind a desk every day. In fact, he's very seldom behind a desk. So, Kent, as we do start today, I want to have a discussion on your motto that you brought with us when you came to Auburn, the compassion, accountability, and community, and how that informs the work that we do.
Yeah, so the compassion, accountability, and community started in Redmond and really trying to wrap my head around what we were trying to accomplish there. How do we treat people? How does this work as a whole community and not just, the Kent Hay show or duplicating, what other outreach workers have done, but really trying to make this a whole city outreach program rather than, Kent Hay doing outreach. So compassion is really the, going out to the folks, going to the tents, going to the encampments, going to the cars, going to the RVs, where people are at, inside, outside, and people who are on the verge of homelessness. There's just an array of people out there and problems that we try to address. And offering as many services as possible, trying to help people. At some point, there are people who are not ready to take the help, don't want to take the help. Contrary to belief, there are people who want to stay outside, who don't want to acclimate back into community and have the responsibilities and the challenges and the stress that come with paying rent and, all the things that come around with
budgeting, things
exactly,
like that.
Budgeting. And so, where there's no structure, sometimes we have to apply that structure and hold people accountable and say, if you're going to be a part of this city, we want you to be a part of the city and everything that comes with it. And so you're still accountable for your behavior, whether it's mental health, whether it's, financial or drug addiction and all the things, you're still accountable for yourself because we want you to be a part of this community. So we need you to get up. So the accountability part really is about how do we make people uncomfortable enough to do something different. I know a lot of people have a hard time with that, but if you don't have the ability or you've given up, sometimes, you have to give somebody that structure and say, no, that you're better than this, you deserve better than this, we want better for this, we want you to want better, for yourself. And so we have to sometimes make it a little difficult for people to come to the table, because if you don't participate, there's no way to get out of the situation. And the community part really is about how do we show people that even if you can't live in the city that you want to live in, and this is where this came from, is housing people outside of where they want to be at sometimes has to be done because they don't have the financial ability to stay where they're at. And so if we can get you somewhere where your money works for you and then put things in place so that you can have those stepping stones to get to where you want to be at, we want to see you housed, we want you to be successful and do better. But at the same time, people miss their community. So one of the ways that how we try to get people to remember that they're part of the community is try to get community to wrap themselves around people. So whether it's trying to get the faith community involved to provide that that love that the faith community provides, the long term walk along somebody, to give them that feeling that they're still part of this community and that we still care. And so reaching out to them once in a while to check on them, or just to say hi or how are you doing, and let them remember that they still are a part of the city of Auburn, and we're still here for them.
Yeah, there's a lot right there. And I think many organizations, and again, I do believe that all of the organizations out there want to do the very best for the individuals that they are working with. But sometimes I think it's the compassion and the community, but the accountability piece is missing. And as you were just mentioning, sometimes having an individual not remain in the city where they currently are, I think there are two schools of thought to that. One is either the community that they're currently in is causing the toxicity in their life, and they need to be removed from that, or they need to understand that they should be away from that community. And then there's the one where the community support is absolutely necessary, and they may not want to leave the city. So there's two different very important aspects to that. Sometimes it's critical to the success of the individual to be away from the current toxic situation that they're in. And there's when I talk about our approach to the compassion, accountability, and community, I've heard some say, well, you're missing another C word in there, and that is consequences. And I think we need to focus some of our efforts on those consequences as well, and ensure that everyone is held accountable. And I've said it a lot of times before, it's not just the government, it's not the funders, it's not the service providers, but it's those receiving the services as well. There may not be the same level of accountability that you and I may have in this situation, but everyone needs to be held accountable in some way, shape, or form. I know down at the Ray of Hope, when Debbie first opened that up for the city of Auburn, and it's, if you can clean up your area where you were just eating after you finished a meal, then you should be held accountable for cleaning up that area. If you can clean up inside the Ray of Hope, then do that. If you can go outside and help, and Debbie has had people with Ray of Hope safety vests on going and cleaning the streets, because that's part of being a good neighbor, a good community member. And so we just need to realize that what may be accountable for us is not accountable for everyone, but that there needs to be some level of accountability.
Correct.
So on that note of accountability, we've recently, under your expertise and a lot of hours and hard work on your side, have began the Auburn Community Court. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know you were instrumental in Redmond, getting the first King County Community Court operating. Now that you're here in Auburn and you've done similar work, tell us about that and how do you see similarities and differences?
Yeah, so building the community court here in Auburn, or helping to get that going with a great team that we have, prosecutors and defense and judge. I had to become the court coordinator for King County to do the budget cuts, and so I took over the role as the court coordinator, which does the assessments for community court. So let me explain, I guess, what community court is. A lot of people still don't know what community court is. So community court is a diversion court, and so the gist of community court is we want people to, it's an opt-in court, so people have a decision to make whether they opt in or opt out of community court. So once someone has a charge, whether it be criminal trespass, theft, possible prostitution, it could be possession, they have the ability, they're offered community court. And so an assessment is completed to see what kind of things that community court can help someone with, whether it's working on housing or the SHS benefits or food or what have you. All that is within the realm of community court. So once someone takes that step to opt in community court, it's a shorter jurisdiction, so they could be in 6 months or less. when they opt in, they come around next door to where our resource center is, and then they make connections with the resources that are available. So it's meant to have a shorter jurisdiction, but hook you up with the services right away, rather than regular court when you come in, you might be on probation for a year or 2 years, and then they give you an array of things that you're supposed to do, and they send you on your way and hope that you are able to make contact with the services that you're supposed to do within the time frame. So the similarities in community court, the difference is, in Redmond, we partnered with the library, the Redmond Library. And so our resource center and community court was ran inside the library. So it was a collaboration between the city, the library, and King County District Court. Here in Auburn, it's a partnership between the city and King County District Court, but we have our own area where we house our shelter. It will house our food bank, but it also houses our community court and our resource center. And so with COVID, there were some challenges, and I wanted to make sure that we were still seeing people in person. So we wanted to give people both the options of virtually coming, where they can drop in via Zoom and meet with service providers from their home, or come in physically and sit down in front of an iPad and meet with providers virtually, and some of the providers still come to the resource center. So we get around 20 to 30 people every Thursday that come to the resource center. So that's open to the public as well as community court participants. And right now, I believe we have probably around 10 to 12 probably participants in community court. And so it's moving, and we've graduated some folks and closed some cases. And the good thing about community court is, when you've completed community court, your case is dismissed. So that's the
carrot.
That's the carrot.
It's the carrot. We want to provide, and let's make sure that we include that these are all misdemeanor crimes, nonviolent, and the person who has been charged has to agree to opt in, and then they become a participant. They're not considered a defendant. So we're trying to remove some of that, the coldness, if you will, of court, and allowing them an opportunity to ensure the consequences, the outcomes are favorable. And it does take dedication on the part of the participant, because they have to show up in community court every week, right? Every week that it's operating, they have to show up. They have to be ready to answer the questions that the judge has asked. I was there a week or two ago to watch what was going on, and right now it's that hybrid world. We had some individuals who were remote, and a few that were in the room that we have set up for community court, and there were a couple people there that were observing to see whether they were going to opt in the following week. And I think it's a great benefit to our community, and it still holds people accountable. Not everyone is going to benefit in some way, shape, or form from sitting in a jail cell. I believe in housing for everyone, but you've heard me say it before too, Kent. Sometimes that means it's a jail cell. Is that housing for at least a period of time based on accountability? But we want to make sure that people in Auburn are treated as community members. Right? That's what you and I talk about a lot. And during the last episode, we shared a little bit about Auburn's philosophy when it comes to dealing with homelessness. We believe we should remove things that enable people to stay on the streets longer than they should have. And we believe that there are many things that are being done today that keep people in unsafe and unhealthy situations, instead of helping them move towards better ways of living. I would say, you and I have talked about it before, but we are anti-homeless. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a mean thing. We don't believe that people should have to endure homelessness. So that's just the statement of we are anti-homeless, not anti-people, just anti-homeless. And that's what we continue to work on. So the Washington State Legislature and the Washington State Supreme Court have passed some laws and handed down some rulings that kind of prevent us from doing things we know would help some of those individuals experiencing homelessness. And we believe that these things are keeping people on the streets much longer than they should be, and these people are suffering longer than they have to because of it. We believe it's harmful to the person living on the streets in unhealthy, dangerous, and unsanitary conditions to stay there, yet our efforts to move people from encampments and clean up the hazardous waste in them is obstructed by some of these laws that have gone in effect or the court rulings. So let's talk about some of those, Kent, some of the laws that are preventing you from helping people in Auburn, and the one that was designed to help last year that the City Council in Auburn passed that would have outlawed camping on public property, and what was that law designed to accomplish. So let's maybe talk about, let's do it in the order that it occurred. We in Auburn passed an ordinance for criminal trespassing on city-owned properties.
Correct.
So talk a little bit about why we wanted our city council to adopt that ordinance.
Yeah, so the ordinance, and it was a big what to do. And I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about it, and still today have a lot of feelings about it. I still get, people who are upset about the camping ordinance. But I think what people don't maybe want to understand or have a hard time wrapping their mind around is that, we all have to live here. People who are homeless, people who live inside, and people want to feel safe, and people want to be able to walk into places and, not step on needles and, walk through meth smoke and fentanyl and then, step on bubbles and everything that goes on outside. And then, you have the wetlands where it's protected wetlands, but you have people cutting down trees, and you have people stepping on things that, shouldn't be stepped on. It's just ruining the environment, and people dumping stuff in the waters that flow down the Green River and the White River and, and the fish and everything that goes on. And so, one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that we provided the compassion part, right? Which was go to the places, not tell people, come see me and let me help you inside. It's, let me take my table, let me take my computer, my MiFi hotspot, sign you up for benefits, try to get you a housing voucher, work on your benefits, hook you up with family if that's the case, get you in the shelter. But we want to make sure that we offer that first, because the law says unless if you want to move someone, you have to offer them a place to go. Mm-hmm. And so when we go out there, when I go out there, I offer the services, but we want to make sure that we're giving people a place the option to go on the side. So people don't have to. If I go out and say, hey, here's our camping ordinance, you're not allowed to camp in this area, but I want to offer you shelter. And people say, no, they don't have to leave. They don't have to go into shelter, but they can't stay here. Right. So there's a 48-hour notice given to people who are camping on Auburn property. We want to give those people the ability to go inside, and if they don't want to, that's fine, but they can't stay in the area that they are in. And should they still be there 48 hours later, they could be trespassed, and then if they continue to stay, they could be arrested for trespassing.
Yeah, and that law or that ordinance did pass. When we originally took it to council, it failed 4-3, but when we brought it back with some small changes in the language, was that in 2020 or 2021? It's hard to remember. The years have kind of blended together with COVID. But Anyway, over a year ago when we brought it to council with those nuanced changes, it was then supported 4-3. And then, it was a year ago, because then just a few months later is when the laws were changed through the state legislature for police reforms, and also the Blake decision, which did not, the state legislature.
If I can interrupt real quick, I just wanted to jump in and just a real quick story of how we got that vote. One of the votes changed, and I want to tell this story because it's important. Is I took one of the council members out to a place where people were camping, and it's a group of people that I had known since I've been here and trying to offer assistance, and there's a lot of drug addiction going on. And there was an older woman who had just come to Auburn that I just met, and we were talking about her going into housing at some point. And she finally decided that she wanted to take to help, and she was a heroin addict. And I found her in this location. We went there to check on her, and I walked in and she was waiting for me, and we were talking about an adult family home and getting her situated and maybe some treatment. And the next week she had overdosed and she died in that encampment. And so that, it was very sad. Her kids had to come out to the place where she was camping with all the garbage and everything that she was living in and pick through that stuff to get reminiscences of her, of their mom.
It didn't need to be that way.
It didn't have to be like that, And so leaving people out here to die is just something that we just can't tolerate in Auburn. And so there's many people who have a hard time with the camping ordinance. The goal is to really get to those people, again, make it uncomfortable enough so we can have that conversation of what change looks like so people don't have to die out here, because we don't pretend like people don't exist in the bushes out here in Auburn.
Right. I mean, it was supposed to be leverage. It was never the first tool in the toolkit. It was a last resort, but it provided a little bit of leverage. And then when the state legislature created some police reforms, it kind of sounds odd that police reforms and working with individuals who are in the encampments aligns, but it really does, because it impacted what police officers were able to do. And while Kent, you go out on your own, you don't take a police officer with you, you carry a police radio, but you don't take officers out with you. It now really puts more obstacles in the way of some individuals getting the help that they need, because officers can't be out there. We can't move people as easily, putting them into shelter, not just moving them along, because I don't believe that approach works either. You can't just shut down an encampment and not provide them with services because they're just going to go start another encampment. And that's not the goal.
Correct.
It's not a net sum zero gain. It's supposed to be to get individuals inside, which I think we might have touched on a little bit last time, but individuals who are chronically homeless are not as quick to want to go inside as we might think they are, or if we're putting our own emotions and feelings into a situation. If someone said, Nancy, I have housing for you, can you leave tomorrow? Or it's planned, let's go in there, you've been on the list, your housing is available tomorrow. In my mind, I would jump on that opportunity to no longer be outside in the elements. But some individuals who are chronically homeless, that's more trauma to them, because we have left them outside for so long that the new trauma is being inside, not knowing how to pay your rent, the demons that are the quiet after the day is over and you're inside these four walls. So there's a lot to think of. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But along those same lines, let's talk about some of the mental health challenges, because with those state reforms also came requirements for police to call in mental health professionals. But tell me about some of the experiences you've had, the challenges that you've had working with individuals, and perhaps when the police have had to be there as well.
Yeah, I'll touch on one story because I'll make it short. But when I got here, there's a guy who has been staying outside for a long time, and his mom is involved in his situation, and he has some severe mental health issues, and a lot of people take advantage of him. And there are people in the homeless community who do try to help as much as possible, but there's a lot of taking of money and a lot of assaults and things that happen to him when he's out here. And so one of the situations when the law passed was he's not on medication. He has his episodes, and he was taking off his clothes and was running naked in the park, and there was a baseball game going on. There was people around, and the police were being called, but the police would stop and kind of look because they didn't want to put themselves in a situation where they grab someone and then it becomes a use of force, and they don't know what that means, and then trying to put someone on a gurney so it was just kind of watching and see, and you would see this man, in need of a lot of help, running around in the street, could get hit by a car. He's running and tearing up things around, and so then you would just have to let him be. There's another situation where he got amped up again, or he had an episode, and he was in the store, and he was just tearing the store apart, knocking down all the things in the store and in the gas station, and the cops were called. And again, he was naked and he was running around, and he was just, he is a risk to himself. He's a risk to everybody else. But at the same time, even when the MHPs would come and say he needs to be involved, there was no way to get him there because of the use of force, right? So we would just let him run around and hope for the best.
And I am hopeful. Kent, I know you don't use the word hope very often, but I am hopeful. And we have been working on it as well. So the actions are going along with this hope that there will be some changes, some adjustments to some of the law enforcement or law reforms that went into effect last year. And I am thankful to our legislators who are listening to the concerns that we have and are looking at making some adjustments to that language. One of the things that I will always say is, at what point in time did the rights of the individual shooting or choosing to shoot up in one of our parks and leave their dirty needles there become more important than the rights of the young child who wants to play softball or soccer there? I just cannot accept that. And I'll receive emails and phone calls saying Auburn is horrible, you're not doing anything about homelessness. And that's not true. We're doing a lot, we're spending a lot, and we're seeing some positive outcomes. I think we could be seeing more if some of this legislation changes. We're even in the process of hiring an additional person to go out with you and help out, because the needs are so great in this community. But one of the other things that you, I know, deal with a great deal are not just the encampments, but individuals in RVs or cars. And I'll get phone calls from people in our community who are complaining about, I see all of these old, worn out, beat up RVs and all of the garbage and things that are accumulating in a neighborhood. And we don't like that either, right? It's when people say, I can't believe that you're letting this happen. We're not letting anything happen. We're doing everything, and the process takes a while. And do you want to talk a little bit about the Homestead Act that is a bit of a hindrance, or it's allowing individuals to be on the streets in their vehicles as opposed to taking advantage of the services that we have available?
Definitely. So the Homestead Act is one that is very challenging. So what the law says is that if someone lives in their car, whether it be a van or RV or whatever it is, and they're using it as a place to live, that you're unable to put a lien on someone's house. So that means if we tow a vehicle, the tow company is responsible for giving that vehicle back, because they can't put a price on it, because that would be putting a lien on someone's house. So they can't do that, so they have to give it back. So the problem becomes now that the tow companies don't make any money off of that, and so trying to get someone to tow, knowing that they're losing money and that they're not going to get any money and having to give the car back, they'd rather not. And so that's the difficult part about the Homestead Act, is when you have these vehicles where people are just giving out vehicles from their home that no longer works, or they want to get rid of and they don't want to pay the money, and so they give it to someone who's homeless, thinking that's going to help.
It's not.
It's not. It becomes a hindrance. It becomes, there's sewer that spills over sometimes. There's the amount of money, I think people understand, the amount of money that it takes to run an RV, to dump sewer, to fix an RV when it breaks down. People just don't have the money for that. So when they break down, they either just lay on the side of the road and they live in those until it falls apart, and then it becomes everybody's problem.
And the sewage as well, because I think we have seen places where they are dumping sewage into areas that it shouldn't be dumped.
Of course. I mean, if your RV doesn't work and you can't get to the place to dump, or you don't have the money to dump, you just kind of open your spigot and it runs into on the side of the
Our
road
storm
there.
drains
Exactly.
Where it shouldn't be going. And I don't want anyone to think that we are not compassionate. Right? That's one of our three words: compassion, accountability, and community. And compassion is the first word for a reason. But it is inhumane for us to allow people to live outside when there are resources available to them. Now, again, there are individuals who just flat out want to live outside. We're not necessarily talking about them, although I would challenge that if they have a substance use disorder, they may not be making some of the best decisions they've ever made in their lives. But there are laws in place that surround that as well. But I think we can commit to the fact that we are going to continue to try and get people off of the streets into housing. The city of Auburn is one of the locations where King County purchased a hotel for the Health Through Housing initiative that will allow, I think there's 102 rooms. They won't use all of those for permanent supportive housing, but Kent, I know you've been signing people up for whenever the hotel becomes operational as that King County facility, once they identify a service provider and get all of the logistics worked out. You have signed up lots and lots of people that might be interested, but just because you've signed them up doesn't mean they're going to really want to be in that facility, and that's hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile that, or do we reconcile that?
Yeah, I think the difficulty people don't understand, because I've talked to a lot of people about the hotel and going in, and so, what I've heard from some folks is that, if it's not structured well and there's just a lot of stuff going on there that's happening outside, then they don't want to be in there, right? So I think, and I'll put it this way, so when you go into a place like this and when you're living outside, you have a lot of options to move away from people who are causing problems. So if someone is in an encampment or making a lot of noise or what's going on, you can pick up your tent, you can move to another place. You don't have to be bothered with that person. When you're in a hotel and you got a room and someone's making noise or carrying on and doing all the stuff that they're doing, you can't just say, I'm going to move down the hall. You're stuck in that situation. So rather, for folks who live outside, there's always a default of, I know how to live outside. And so as long as you have that, right, people are like, well, I don't have to stay here. I know how to camp outside and I'll go back outside. And so I think I hear a lot of that of, I hope it's not just a free for all and I don't want to be in there. But then you hear the flip side of it too, is I want to be able to go in place and use. I don't want to have all the structure. So it's complicated.
Yeah, there is no easy answer to all of this. If there was, the issue would have been solved a long time ago. But I just want to reinforce to people who are listening, and by the way, thank you for listening in, that we are working on the issues here in Auburn. We believe in the value of people, and if you are in our community, you are a part of our community. But we also believe that every city should be feeling this way and taking accountability in their own communities and not referring people out of their own city. Yeah. Now, there are some cities that may not have the same resources that we have available, but every city should be taking responsibility for their own community. And I think we can probably get into that in our next episode, part 3 of our series, when we will invite some of our local service providers in to talk with you as well about what we're doing to bring people off of the streets. In the meantime, I would encourage anyone who has some concerns over recent legislation, or just to share your ideas, your opinions with your representatives and senators at the state level, to go find out who your representatives are. And you can do that at the website www.leg.wa.gov. And it's important that they hear from you, not just when they're in session like they are right now, but at any time of the year. But really important right now as they're making decisions that will impact us at least through the next year. Any final thoughts from you, Kent, before we close out today?
Yeah, if I can leave, I guess the listeners is one thing, and this is usually what I tell people about homelessness. If you can wrap your mind around it, is if you think about it this way: when you're in prison, I used to work in prison. When you're in prison, they take away all your freedom, and they give you all the structure. And then so when you're released, you come back into a world of freedom, and it's really hard to adjust back there. And so it's simple, even though you don't want to be in prison, to go back in prison and fall back into that structure, because it's what you're familiar with. Outside, we give you all the freedom and we take away all the structure. And so when you go back inside, now we hit you with a whole bunch of structure. Then you always go back to what's familiar, so it's easy for you to go back outside and get familiar. So I used to say homelessness was comfortable, and I've changed my way of thinking about that. I mean, sometimes it's still comfortable for people, but I will call it familiar. People do what's familiar. And so we've left people out here so long that they've become familiar with this, and it's hard for someone to do something that's not familiar. So, it's complicated. Homelessness is.
People are complicated.
People are complicated.
But when you add homelessness into that equation, it becomes so much more so complicated. Kent, thank you for being the special guest once again and for your tireless efforts. You never cease to amaze me, and with the stories that you come in and share about individuals that you've worked with, I am in awe of the work that you do, and it is so necessary for our city. And so thank you for joining us for this episode of That's So Auburn.
Thanks for having me, Mary.